In an ancient Jurassic Earth, a caveman named Spear makes his way back home from fishing for food while avoiding predators, such as a giant crocodile and a pterosaur. When he finally reaches his family's den, he finds his wife, daughter, and son all being attacked and eaten by 3-horned theropods. Enraged, Spear takes on the trio, but their alpha parent appears and summons them back into the forest before they can attack Spear. A distraught Spear walks into the cave that once housed his family and angrily removes a cave painting of them. Later, he climbs a tall cliff and stands at its edge, where he attempts suicide. Ultimately, he decides to continue living and stays the rest of the night on the cliff. As the sun rises the next morning, Spear sees a vision of his mate and children in the sun, which gives him a chance to live. Sometime later, while hunting fish for himself to eat, Spear spots the shadow of a Tyrannosaurus, catching a mouthful of fish before retreating into a marsh. Still filled with hatred, as he mistakenly believes it to be one of the horned theropods who killed his family, Spear follows the dinosaur with the plan of killing it. Upon catching up with the Tyrannosaurus, Spear is shocked as he finds out that it is a hornless female with 2 young cubs. Before Spear can act further, the same theropods that had killed his family arrive and attempt to kill the mother and her offspring, while choosing to ignore Spear. Not wanting to see another family torn apart, Spear intervenes by helping the mother Tyrannosaurus kill the hostile dinosaurs. With the pack now dead, the little cubs approach Spear and nuzzle him affectionately for saving them, while Spear smiles as he reminds them of his children. However, the moment is interrupted as the pack's alpha bursts from the marsh and attacks the group. Spear and the mother Tyrannosaurus, now known as Fang, helplessly watch as the massive alpha devours the young cubs in a single bite. After a long and brutal fight with the help of Fang, Spear manages to slay the alpha by impaling it through the brain with his spear, finally avenging both his family and Fang's children, although Fang is left distraught over the loss of her offspring. Later, Spear wanders on a beach alone, contemplating the day's events. He is suddenly approached by Fang, who appears to want to follow him, since she has nothing left. After a moment of consideration, Spear accepts Fang as his new companion, and the two decide to head off on new adventures. Spear is chasing down a large wild boar in order to kill it for food. As he aligns his spear to throw it at the animal, Fang intervenes by catching the boar herself and proceeds to eat it, stealing Spear's kill. Frustrated, Spear moves on and continues to hunt for more food. Eventually finding another boar, Spear manages to kill it and is excited to finally eat. Climbing down from a tree, he finds Fang eating his kill. Now enraged, Spear confronts Fang, screaming and pounding the ground in anger. Unfazed, Fang continues to eat the boar. Later, Spear climbs a tree in order to get some fruit. Fang sees this and rams the tree with her head, knocking both Spear and a handful of fruit down. Before Spear can eat the fruit, Fang eats all of it. Spear shoves Fang and threatens her, but ultimately backs down. At night, Spear and Fang sleep around a fire. Fang's heavy breathing agitates Spear, who throws stones at her face. Attempting to distract himself from the noise, Spear makes shadow puppets on the wall, causing him to remember his children. Spear then remembers that his children were devoured by a Tyrannosaurus, which Fang happens to be. Spear stares Fang down, seething in anger. Sensing this, Fang awakens and growls back. The next day, Spear is out hunting a deer. Yet again, Fang is prepared to steal the kill, but she is confronted by Spear. When Spear goes to kill the deer, Fang is already there to steal the kill, despite Spear's warning. Now enraged, Spear finally loses it and proceeds to fight Fang for the kill, with the two actually hurting each other, drawing blood. The two come to an intense standoff, but the duo are horrified when they notice a pile of massive snakes surrounding the immediate forest. Just as Spear and Fang start to slowly back away, a flash flood swoops over the area, carrying with it hundreds of large snakes. Spear and Fang work together to survive the flood in a gigantic individual snake, eventually coming to earn each other's trust and respect. Fang even tends to Spear's head injury after the latter had hit his head on a rock during the flood. They learn how to hunt together and end up sharing their kills at the end of every hunt, as a team. The next day, a herd of mammoths is traversing through a blizzard, but an elderly individual in the herd struggles to keep up due to its old age, and is eventually separated due to the blizzard. Later, after the storm had died down, the elderly mammoth wanders aimlessly through the frozen terrain, searching for the herd, before suddenly being ambushed by Spear and Fang. Though initially putting up a tough fight, the elderly mammoth is ultimately overwhelmed by the duo and is killed. Spear proceeds to skin the mammoth, taking large quantities of fur and meat, as well as also taking the deceased mammoth's only tusk. After traversing the terrible snow blizzard, Spear and Fang find a small cave to eat and spend the night in. While Fang is content with the day's hunt, Spear, meanwhile, thinks back to when he first taught his son how to hunt. He remembers teaching his son about respecting animals and being grateful for the food they provide. Meanwhile, the elderly mammoth's herd finds its corpse scavenged by wolves. Chasing the scavengers off, the herd surrounds their elder's body and begins to mourn. Startled and filled with rage, the herd spots Fang and Spear's footprints and proceeds to follow them. The mammoth herd soon finds Spear and Fang at the cave and fights them for the tusk. After being cornered and nearly killed, Spear swings the elderly mammoth's tusk wildly in defense of himself. Noticing the reaction of the mammoths, Spear realizes that they only came to retrieve the tusk. Respectfully, Spear offers the tusk to the matriarch, who takes it and leaves with the herd without further violence. Sometime later, the mammoth herd delivers the tusk to a mammoth graveyard, filled with the bones of their ancestors and other members of the herd. Proceeds to perform a ritual around their fallen elder, swaying back and forth, rumbling and running their trunks over its tusk one last time, as they say their final goodbyes to their deceased member. On another evening, Fang is seen running through an open field with Spear on her back as a massive pack of raptors pursues them. After a lengthy chase with numerous raptors being killed by the duo, Spear and Fang are surrounded. Before they can pounce, the raptors suddenly flee the area, seemingly terrified. The moon suddenly turns blood red, and a thick fog envelops the area. While wandering, Spear and Fang spot an emaciated-looking caveman carrying the corpse of a wild boar on his back. After tripping and dislocating his leg, the caveman hoots and hollers, calling out to his family, who watch from the safety of a cave. Another caveman runs out to retrieve the boar, but is suddenly snatched by a large flying creature. Wanting to help, Spear picks up the wounded caveman and the boar and carries them to the cave. The cavemen retreat deeper into the cave, leaving Spear and Fang confused. Suddenly, the duo are attacked by a flock of massive, crimson-red humanoid bats. After a brutal fight, the bats manage to capture Spear and bring him back up to their nest on a steep rocky mountain. Determined to find Spear, Fang tracks the bats down to their den. Playing possum, Fang tricks the bats into picking her up and bringing her inside their den. Inside, she finds Spear wrapped in a strange, silk-like material. It is revealed that the bats share the cave with a massive prehistoric spider, whom they share a symbiotic relationship with. Fang fights the spider while Spear manages to break free of the webbing. Together, they kill the spider and escape the nest before the bats return. However, the bats manage to track Spear and Fang down upon finding out that the duo have killed the spider. The duo leads the bats into a patch of tall grass where the raptor pack resides. The raptors ambush the bats, and while the two species fight, Spear and Fang make a quick escape. Spear and Fang travel through the jungle and come across a peaceful oasis. While Fang drinks from the water and gets caught in a swarm of butterflies, Spear attempts to fish. To his surprise, the fish are completely unafraid, swimming directly into his hands. He quickly gathers a large pile, sharing them with Fang. However, when he turns away for a moment, Fang eats the entire pile, leaving Spear to chuckle at her sheepish look. They enjoy a moment of peace, with Fang placing her footprint next to Spear's handprint in the sand as a sign of trust and affection. However, Fang's tranquility is shattered when she spots an earthworm crawling from the ground, triggering a flashback to her near-death experience in a snake-infested flash flood, showing that the worm is harmless, but Fang refuses to listen, and Spear devours it. Afterward, Spear goes for a swim while Fang lounges on a boulder. As he swims underwater, Spear notices shadowy figures approaching Fang's resting spot. When he surfaces and climbs onto the rock, Fang is gone, with only footprints and disturbed sand indicating she was dragged into the forest. As he follows the trail, something knocks him out. Spear awakens bound in vines, being carried by humanoid ape men. After being knocked unconscious again, he later finds himself tied up beside Fang, both suspended over an arena at night. The arena is filled with bloodthirsty ape men, and a shaman initiates a brutal gladiatorial contest. A powerful fighter named Krog emerges victorious by defeating his opponents with brutal efficiency. As the crowd cheers, Fang is lowered into the arena, and Krog is granted a choice of 3 animal skulls and a mysterious black ooze from a stone bowl. Krog drinks the ooze and undergoes a monstrous transformation, growing larger and more powerful. Fang charges at Krog but is easily overpowered. He brutally beats her, breaking her leg and preparing to finish her off. Desperate, Spear breaks free and attacks Krog, only to be thrown aside. Seeing no other option, Spear climbs to the shaman's perch and drinks the entire bowl of black ooze, mutating into a massive turquoise-skinned beast. Now empowered, Spear easily defeats Krog, ripping off his arms and beating him with them. The other ape men swarm the arena, but Spear massacres them all in a berserk rage. By morning, he emerges from a pile of corpses, reverting to his normal self. Stunned by the carnage, he turns his attention to Fang, who lies motionless. Kneeling beside his fallen companion, Spear desperately tries to wake her, but she does not respond, leaving him in despair. After slaughtering the ape men who captured him, Spear mourns over Fang, who seems to have been killed by the ape men's late champion. However, he soon discovers that the Tyrannosaur is still alive, if severely injured. As Spear fetches a water sack from nearby, his attention is drawn to some vultures scavenging on the remains of the ape men. After shooing them away, Spear returns to Fang's side, giving her some water before using the rest to make clay for her wounds. This is uncomfortable for Fang, but it seems to be working. As Spear continues working on Fang's injuries, the vultures return in greater numbers. Realizing that the arena is no longer safe, Spear attempts to move Fang, but she proves far too heavy for even his great strength. Fortunately, Spear gets the idea to fashion a makeshift stretcher for Fang using bamboo sticks and vines lying around the arena. He even makes a new spear after finding a sharp stone in a spare stick. With considerable effort, he manages to push Fang onto the stretcher and lift it enough to drag it. Later on, Spear is forced to stop as his hands are covered in blisters. As the sun begins to set, he hears a creature's calls from the woods, which turns out to be a wild dog. He creates fire to form a defensive perimeter whilst they rest for the night. The dog watches them, but makes no effort to attack. The next morning, Spear creates a harness to add to the stretcher, allowing him to pull Fang far more easily. However, an ever-growing number of dogs are following in his wake. Spear spots a small cave to shelter him and Fang for the night as the dogs continue to watch them. Spear is awoken by several small flesh-eating insects crawling at his face. Realizing that they are attracted to the defenseless Fang, he proceeds to attack them, but soon discovers that they're both vulnerable and helpless after being flipped onto their backs. After killing the bugs, he cooks them over a fire, feeding some to Fang and eating others himself. The following morning, Spear goes to collect more water. Smelling the wild dogs nearby, he blocks the cave entrance with several large boulders to protect Fang. The Tyrannosaur awakens in the evening to the sounds of numerous dogs around the cave, attempting to find a way in until Spear returns and fights through them on his way back inside. Seeing the numerous scratches covering Spear's body, Fang struggles to her feet. However, Spear convinces her to stay down and recover her strength while he fends off the scavengers. Noticing a few insect carcasses lying around, he can use their durable spiked shells as makeshift knuckle dusters. Thus armed, Spear climbs out of the blocked cave entrance to find hundreds of wild dogs waiting for him. His improvised weapons prove to be incredibly useful against the attackers, but their sheer numbers begin to overwhelm him. Suddenly, the rocks in front of the cave are sent flying as Fang literally bursts onto the stage, fully recovered and ready to help Spear. With her added strength and ferocity, the wild dogs are sent fleeing for their lives, leaving Spear and Fang to roar triumphantly. In a peaceful forested valley, a herd of Argentinosaurus lives undisturbed, feeding, drinking, and tending to their nests. Their tranquility is shattered when one member encounters a deathly ill hadrosaur, its body visibly decaying as it moves erratically. Ignoring the creature at first, the Argentinosaurus reacts only after being bitten on the leg, where it dies in a futile struggle. Unaware of the danger, the bitten Argentinosaurus inspects its wounds and heads to the pond for a drink. As it walks, its movements slow, and its flesh begins to decay unnaturally. Drinking large amounts of water fails to soothe it, instead causing it to vomit blood into the pond. Its herdmates watch in alarm as pustules spread across its body. The valley erupts into chaos when the infected Argentinosaurus turns on its own herd. One member attempts to resist, but has its throat torn out. The infected sauropod then massacres the rest, crushing, biting, and slamming them into the landscape. Later, Spear and Fang enter the same forest, disturbed by the untouched corpses. Even scavengers and insects avoid the scene. Fang sniffs a body and recoils in fear. As they take in the horror, the infected Argentinosaurus rises and roars. Realizing they cannot fight it, Spear and Fang flee, leading a chase through the woods. They evade the beast by jumping into a ravine, where it crashes at the bottom and loses consciousness. Exhausted, they retreat to a cave to rest. Spear has a nightmare of being bitten by the same plague monster, watching his body decay, only to see Fang suffering the same fate. Jolting awake, he checks on their foe, finding it still motionless. He and Fang cautiously descend the cliff to escape through the ravine. As they pass the Argentinosaurus' rotting body, it suddenly reanimates and resumes the chase. They barely escape through a narrow crevasse, forcing it to thrash helplessly. Fleeing into a volcanic plain, they endure burning embers and unstable ground. Just as they turn back, the infected Argentinosaurus tears itself free, exposing much of its ribcage. With no other option, Spear and Fang rush through the lava field, where the monster's neck is burned by a geyser. Enraged, it leaps but crashes through the brittle ground, falling into molten lava. Spear and Fang leap onto its back, using its neck as a ramp to escape. The beast's next attempt to jump out results in its complete entrapment. It howls one last time. Spear and Fang watch in stunned silence as a single ember lands on Spear's palm, reflecting on the creature's gruesome end. Spear and Fang are traveling through the jungle at night, attempting to reach a bright green, sky-high flame. They arrive at the edge of the scene and witness a bearded caveman suspended above the green flames, screaming in agony as a group of witches intensify the fire. The witches then perform a chant that summons the pteranodon-riding head witch to the site of the ritual. She makes her way down to the fire, raises her staff, and shapeshifts into a tall, black demon with light green highlights. The bearded caveman has a magical snake travel down his throat, which causes all the markings painted on his body to shift towards his stomach. The snake emerges from his throat and sucks the life force out of him, mummifying him. The snake slithers into the head witch, forming a baby in her stomach, which she plucks out and hands to the eager witches. The pteranodon spots Spear and Fang and alerts the head witch, causing the witches to pursue them into the jungle. Spear and Fang lose each other, and while Spear is fending off his pursuers, Fang is being mind-controlled by the small witch Lula. Spear awakens the next morning and finds himself tied above the fire pit. Lula returns on Fang's back, to which Spear becomes incredibly distraught, screaming and thrashing around. His cries temporarily break the mind-controlling spell until Lula pauses time and travels into the memories of Spear and Fang. She visits Fang's memory first, where we are taken to her original home and witnesses her offspring hatching. Lula fast-forwards to the events where she watches Spear defending Fang's offspring and their subsequent deaths. She returns to the present, gives Fang a hug, then goes into Spear's past. Lula arrives at Spear's cave shortly before his daughter is born, watches as he takes her outside, then fast-forwards to when they are eaten by the horned theropod pack. Lula unfreezes time and returns to her hut where she parts a hanging cloth, revealing a wall drawing of her and a child. Lula travels into her own memories of the day the child was born. Her memories take her to a field of flowers, where Lula and her daughter spent time together when a scream is heard. Past Lula goes to investigate and finds her daughter has fallen off a cliff, sending her into tears. She returns to the present and prepares Spear's markings for the next ritual. Upon nightfall, the head witch returns to perform, but Lula sneaks up to the pteranodon's perch and kills it, then sets Spear free using a mind-controlled Fang. Infuriated, the head witch shapeshifts into a giant wolf and attacks Fang. Lula transforms into a huge raven and distracts the head witch long enough to allow Spear and Fang to escape deep into the jungle. Lula is eventually overpowered and killed by the head witch, severing the bond between her and Fang. Lula now walks along with her daughter. They run towards each other and share a hug, finally together. In the dead of night, a Smilodon roams the forest in search of prey. It picks up a scent and begins growling at an unseen creature among the trees, only to be swiftly and violently attacked. Camping nearby, Spear and Fang overhear the assault. They momentarily ready themselves for battle, but stand down when the apparent threat fails to appear. The following morning, Spear and Fang travel deeper into the forest, where they stumble across the Smilodon's brutalized corpse. Fang is extremely agitated, to the point where she briefly flees into the woods. She takes one sniff of the carcass and roars at it with fierce intensity, Spear examining the remains for a while before he and Fang continue onward. When night falls, the mysterious creature becomes active again, stalking a passing herd of ceratopsians. One stops to drink from a stream before sensing something amiss. It turns to face the threat only to be swiftly slaughtered. The rest of the herd flies into a panic as they're picked off one by one. Once again, Spear and Fang hear the noises from their campsite. Visibly disturbed by the sounds of carnage, Spear grabs his weapon and moves to join the battle. After a brief argument, Spear reluctantly stands down, leaving him and Fang to try to get some rest as the screams of the herd echo into the night. Once the sun rises, Spear and Fang go hunting, quite on edge after the events of the previous night. They're startled by a tiny theropod as it hunts for insects, which Fang sends running with an annoyed roar. Hearing the cries of crows, Spear climbs a tree and spots the birds gathering to scavenge the results of the previous night's slaughter. He and Fang begin moving further from the carnage when a brutal windstorm hit. They take shelter behind a rock when they hear an unnatural screech. They believe they are being followed by the creature, but Spear sees that the noise originated from a tree branch scraping on a rock. Later in the day, the duo make camp, observing a large fly being eaten by a mantis before settling in for the night. Despite their best efforts to keep an eye open for their unknown pursuer, they soon fall asleep around the fire. Moments later, the flames are put out by a strong gust of wind. As the last embers die, the creature's call awakens them. They take up defensive stances, but their nerves get the better of them when they hear something crashing through the underbrush. The pair sprint deeper into the woods, reaching a lower region enveloped by fog. As they stop to catch their breath, the unseen creature catches up, barely missing them as it slashes through the trunk of a massive tree. It gives chase to Spear, who barely stays one step ahead as it tears through several more trees in pursuit of him. Following the trail of destruction, Fang manages to get a bead on the creature. However, it seems to slip away. She quickly shakes it off before running in the opposite direction as Spear, both of them roaring to try to confuse their unseen assailant. Spear can only grab his weapon and flail it around in blind desperation, creates a spark that sends the unseen creature fleeing entirely. Realizing that the monster has a weakness after all, Spear contemplatively ignites the head of his spear as Fang rejoins him, ready to turn the tables on the mysterious killer. The next night, the unseen creature frantically flees through the forest as Spear and Fang terrorize it with sparks and burning trees. Spear throws his flaming weapon into its chest, causing it to burst into flames and revealing its true appearance, putting an end to its reign of terror over the forest. A few days later, Spear and Fang are fishing in a shallow lagoon when a bald-headed Homo sapien woman with a wooden collar around her neck, a scorpion tattoo on the back of her head, and metal cuffs on her wrists suddenly bursts out from the water, followed by a Leopleurodon. As the two battle and eventually kill the sea creature, the woman disappears into the woods, though Spear gives pursuit. They come to a brief moment of peace before Fang appears and scares the woman away. Determined not to let her escape, Spear resumes the chase and cuts the stranger off, leaving her cornered. After a short standoff, Spear lowers his weapon and himself in a peaceful manner. He notices that the woman is cold and makes a campfire for the night before going to sleep. The woman wakes up in the middle of the night and begins praying to the moon as Spear watches. The trio sets off in the morning and travels through various landscapes, such as a volcano range, some grasslands, jungle, and mountainous terrain. They settle down to eat, but the stranger has difficulty eating the raw meat provided by Spear. Instead, she forages local plant matter and a turtle shell to make a stew pot, the smell of which seems to attract Fang as she grabs a carrot-like vegetable from the woman and almost immediately swallows it. Spear does not share the same appreciation for it, and later, again, she prays to the moon that night. The woman wakes up the next morning in discomfort from the large wooden collar around her neck. Spear uses Fang's powerful bite to destroy it, then uses a rock to break off the 2 iron cuffs on the woman's wrist. In appreciation, she speaks her name to Spear, Mira, though he seems not to take notice or does not fully understand what she is saying. Traveling onwards, Mira gathers local materials, which she eventually uses to make a bow, killing a mid-sized avian dinosaur Spear and Fang failed to kill. Feasting on their latest kill, Mira illustrates her backstory in the dirt, giving narration in her language, explaining that her people were enslaved by invaders led by tyrannical warriors represented by a scorpion image, but she was the only one who managed to escape. Spear seems to understand somewhat what she drew and looks unnerved by the scorpion image. The group later cross a deep river by riding on Fang's back as she swims under the water. The party arrives at a cave surrounded by loose rocks, which Fang struggles to climb up, but Mira successfully uses food as an incentive to climb. At night, Mira prays to the moon again, which drives Spear's curiosity enough to inquire about it. Mira gives a short explanation before going to sleep, as Spear gazes longingly at the moon. At dusk, Spear and Fang are awoken and ambushed by a large group of monkey men who have captured Mira. Spear and Fang inflict heavy casualties using Mira's bow, Spear's spear, and the monkey men's own weapons against them before attempting to search for Mira in the foggy forest. They use her screams for help as a guide and come across a number of monkey men corpses littered with arrows, something Spear has only seen Mira use. He finds footprints in the sand, and using Mira's screams, pinpoints the direction to run in. They reach the coast only to find they are too late, as Mira has already been taken onto a boat whose sail bears the same icon Mira's head does. With the boat disappearing over the horizon, Spear utters his first word, Mira, while Fang roars in sadness.